Now miter joints on their own are pretty strong, but if you ever want to reinforce them, or if you're looking to make the joint look a little fancier for a specific piece, splines are a great way to do that. The problem is, the majority of spline jigs you'll see out there are made for going on your table saw or on a router table. And that's great for small work pieces, but if you're building a large piece of furniture or got a big sheet of plywood that you need to put a spline in, it's not very easy to take the workpiece and put it on those devices. So, if you can't bring the workpiece to the tool, you bring the tool to the workpiece. And that's where a handheld router with a spline jig works. But most of those that I've seen out there, like this one, have their own flaw. And that's if your workpiece is too narrow, and the spline jig doesn't fit well on it, and you can't put splines in a narrow workpiece. So does that mean that the only solution is to build two? One for the table saw and one for a handheld router? Well, no. If you stay tuned today, we'll show you how you can build one that works for both big and small pieces. As with most any build out there, the first step was to begin cutting down the materials. If you went ahead and purchased the plans to build this design, I want to thank you for supporting us, and you'll have detailed measurements and a cut list to follow. For those of you without the plans, know that I'm starting by cutting 5 pieces of the spline jig from 1/4 inch plywood scrap that I had around the shop. These pieces will serve as the top, rails, and braces for the jig. Next, I cut the supports for our spline jig out of 3/4 inch plywood by cutting 4 separate 45, 45, 90 degree triangles. The angle here is important, so double check your saw and aim for a solid 45 degree angle cut on each triangle. To allow this jig to sit flat when not in use and provide some additional structural support to the entire build, I then went ahead and cut off about 1 inch off one side of each of my triangle supports. Wait right there, and don't throw away those offcuts, as we'll be using those too. With all the pieces cut down, it was time to begin assembly. The first step was to attach the guide rails to the top of our jig. Now, not all routers have the same base plate dimensions, so the placement of these rails can vary and should be built to your specific router. The main thing to do with the first rail is to try and make it square on the face of the top and position it appropriately so that your router bit will cut through the center of the top piece, or at least close to it. I used a combination of wood glue and CA glue, as the wood glue will give this rail a permanent bond to the top, but the CA glue will quickly adhere it so it doesn't move and I can continue on with the build without waiting for the wood glue to cure. Honestly, quick assemblies like this are the main reason I use CA glue in the workshop. For positioning the second rail, it is entirely based upon the first rail location and the size of your router base plate. What I did was to place my router base plate on my top next to my first rail and use it to get the perfect spacing of the second rail. You want the base plate to be able to slide between the top rails, but not jitter or shift side to side when doing so. You also want to make sure that you get this right on both ends of your rails. Once the rails of the jig were fully adhered, I went ahead and used my router base plate to mark where I want to start and stop using my router. I recommend going ahead and using a Forstner bit to drill these holes out right now as well, as you can position the top on top of a backer piece and minimize tear out if you do so. I forgot to do this and went straight ahead into attaching my supports. To attach the supports, I first marked the center line widthwise on the underside of my jig, and then went ahead and attached the first 2 supports using the wood glue and CA glue method as before. Now, you want the uncut side of your triangle support to be positioned on the underside of your top with the hypotenuse angle away from the marked center line. This allows the off-cut mark on your triangle to serve as a sort of foot for this jig when you're not using it. With those in place, I went ahead and tacked them with some pin nails just to reinforce them while the glue dried. Next, I positioned the final 2 support pieces. To ensure the perfect alignment of these, I used my speed square positioned on the first support to ensure the second pieces gave me a perfect 90-degree angle. Here's a spot where I didn't use the CA glue accelerator because I wanted a little bit of time to get the pieces perfectly aligned. I temporarily reinforced these supports with pin nails as well. Now, if you already drilled out your stop and start holes, good on you, and you're ahead of me. For my build, I went ahead and clamped a sacrificial backer to my jig and drilled out both of my holes with a Forstner bit. Next, I flipped things back upside down and went on to mounting what I'm calling the front and back brace pieces. These brace pieces are the secret to be able to use this jig on small builds. If you're following the plans, you'll notice these are slightly different sizes, and for that reason, you will want to mount your front brace piece first, and then align your back brace against it. For these, I simply used wood glue and pin nails, as I didn't need to move the piece right after gluing. The last pieces to adhere are the offcuts from our triangle support pieces. You probably don't need to attach these pieces, but by making the offcuts in the first place, you already have them. And with a little wood glue, you can just wedge them into place on the inside of each of your supports, and they will add a ton of structural stability to the whole jig, gluing the supports, top, and braces all together. The last step for the jig was to chuck up my router and cut the slot for the spline to be able to align on the workpiece. I then took the jig out for a test run on my current project, if you were hoping to catch a sneak peek. If you found this build video useful, we would appreciate it if you support the channel with a like, a comment, or by subscribing to stay informed to our future builds. Thank you, and we wish you the best as you pursue your own craft.